What is going on, everybody? Welcome into a brand new episode of Studs and Duds. If this is your first episode of this series, just a quick monologue of what this series is all about. So Studs and Duds began back when we had Madden content on this channel, and I would use this series to discuss the rising and falling players around the NFL by using the ratings changes for my own custom Madden roster. Well, no more Madden content on this channel, but this series has stuck around because turns out this is a really fun and effective way to discuss the rising and falling players around the NFL and what the film says about how these guys are playing in real life. So today we are doing the NFC West as I continue to bang out the rest of these end of season episodes here. My goal, by the way, is to get all of these done before NFL free agency hits. I'm trying to kind of mix these in with draft content. Obviously, people are eager for positional rankings and mock drafts as well. So doing my best to keep the content coming, keeping these balanced to get this series done for the season. Before we do get started, if you could please take just a second to hit that like button. A lot of work does go into Studs and Duds. Just show a little love. I really appreciate it. That like really does help support the channel. But let's go ahead and get started with the Arizona Cardinals going first today, and with their super stud, which is essentially their highlight player that I want to talk about the most for each team, sometimes the highest riser, sometimes not. But starting on the defensive side of things for the Cardinals, Garrett Williams, year 2 slot corner / defensive back guru, if you will. Boy, was he the most pleasant of surprises for the Cardinals this year. We already talked about him at the midseason episode where he got a 3 ratings boost. He's getting another 4 here in the ratings, plus 7 on the season. Very much in a respectable range after his first full season as a starter, up to a 76 rating. Really the perfect fit for Jonathan Gannon's defense, a defense that does like to run a lot of complex zone coverages, oftentimes taking that slot corner, dropping them back into a 2 shell or a quarters shell, being a quasi safety at times. And Garrett Williams has taken on this role so well. It's not what he did in college. He was an outside corner. He did play a lot of quarters, so it's a familiar system for him in terms of that top-down zone defense, but really showing off a different skill set here in the pros. And God, it's been fun to see not just the coverage plays he can make, where he's got a really good football IQ, especially for a young player, but he's quick. He can turn on the gas and make a break on the ball quickly, but he's got good ball skills. He just really is a potential high-end zone cover defensive back from the slot. He is a slot cornerback by definition, but he gets a lot of reps just playing safety. Depending on how things rotate and how they want to do things, they do really mix things up, and he is just the perfect chess piece for them back there. But the other area of his game that he's been such a pleasant surprise is his willingness to throw his head down into the mud and be an impact in run defense. It's not always perfect. There's going to be some moments where his size is a limiting factor for him. He's not a full-size safety or anything like that, or as thick as some of these bigger slot corners that can get dirty in the trenches. But man, he had some excellent hits, blowing up bubble screens, tracking guys down to the outside, showing that he is a really nice two-way player. He is locked and loaded as a really building block for this Jonathan Gannon Cardinals defense that we're hoping can take a step forward next year, and Garrett Williams can be a big part of that. But let's bounce over to the offense to continue our conversation on the Cardinals. And it pains me to do this. One of my favorite players in the league, someone I have gone to war over the last couple of years. But Kyler Murray is going to come down in the ratings, down to an 82. I was just frankly disappointed in how he played in the second half of this season. In the first half, I was banging the drum, saying, I told you guys, Kyler Murray can be a top 10 quarterback if he stays healthy and gets a little bit of support. And in the first half of the year, he was a big part of the Cardinals winning multiple games. I think back to what he did against the Dolphins. I think it was the first meeting against the Rams. He had individual elite quarterback performances, and I know he's still capable of that. But once they were in first place and the pressure built up, I think Kyler Murray played his worst football, and it was really discouraging to see what he did. Not necessarily that he had super ugly moments, but I really do think he bottled up. His average depth of target went from 13th in the league in the first half of the season. And then the second half of the year, it went all the way down to the second lowest average depth of target behind just Tua Tagovailoa, again, for the second half of the season. And you felt it watching the Cardinals. He just wasn't playing within himself. When they needed a play, he wasn't pushing the ball downfield. He wasn't using his legs and in showing off the incredible playmaking he can make in scramble drill. It felt more like he made a conscious decision that, hey, we're a run team. We've got a good scheme. I don't need to be superhero. Well, the Cardinals aren't quite there yet, and they did need Kyler to make some bigger plays, and it was a lot of checkdowns, a lot of games where it's just very meh from Kyler Murray. So I am going to ding him for it. I do think he can relook at the film from this season and come back next year and say, all right, we got to find that good blend of aggressiveness and, playing within the system as he did in the first half of the year. But yeah, for now, -2 for Kyler Murray. I think that's justified. But then Trey Benson, the rookie running back, another guy that I banged the drum for, right? This was my RB1. I thought he was going to be a dynamite back out the gate, and unfortunately, it's just not there at this point in time. I still believe in what he did in college, translating to the league. His traits are remarkable. There's a lot of shades of, like, physically speaking, some Joe Mixon in there, some Jonathan Taylor in there with his size, his speed, and we did see some very, very scattered flashes from Trey Benson. But for the most part, I think we're talking about a back that isn't seeing things very well. He's not anticipating run lanes. He's just too hesitant as a runner right now. So hopefully an offseason, getting more familiar with the speed of the NFL and with this team, he can really crank up his vision and running back decision making, because I do think the rest of it is in there. We even saw the missed tackles forced per attempt weren't bad for Trey Benson, but a lot of negative runs, a lot of runs where it's just like, this does not look the part. It does not look like the number one back in the class, where I obviously had him rated quite high as a 74 coming in. So he's going to come down to a 72 until further notice. And then Marvin Harrison Jr., he's had a bit of a roller coaster season with studs and duds. I lowered him in the first episode, and then literally 2 days later, he had his best game of the year. I can't even remember which. I think it was week 7 or week 8, but he had just a ridiculous performance, and I was like, we actually got to raise him. Like, there it is. We knew Marvin could play. And then we see the second half of the season, and it was, again, kind of back to that not bad but underwhelming performance by Marvin Harrison. I'm not worried about him. I think him and Kyler were really close a bunch of times, whether it were timing routes, in the intermediate game, in the deep game, and in the red zone. They were so close on so many of these back shoulder connections, and just different times where the season just fell short with Marvin Harrison. But the separation just wasn't really there. I think he needs to hit the lab again, get better at using push-offs, get better at setting things up in his route so he can separate a little bit better for Kyler. And in terms of the contested catch ability, that was a huge calling card for him coming out of Ohio State. And, there were obvious flashes as well. I have praised him in the NFL for some of these incredible concentration, body control catches. We know it's in there, but he was just 16 of 38 on contested catch looks, 42%. It's not bad, but it's not as great as we wanted to see. So he just didn't quite hit that high bar of what was an 82 rating coming in as a rookie, which is essentially as high as I will go for a player coming into the league. The expectations, you have to contextualize that, right? When we're talking about lowering Marvin Harrison, just didn't quite reach the crazy expectations in his rookie season. Not to say he can't get there. I still believe he can, but I think we got to maybe pump the brakes just a little bit there. But then Trey McBride, there were no pumping of the brakes needed with him. He has fully emerged as a top 5 tight end in the NFL. Second year in a row, too, where he had a good first half of the year, but then the second half of the year hits and the Cardinals are like, oh yeah, we have Trey McBride. Let's force feed this dude. And boy, did he return dividends for the Cardinals. He finishes this season with 1,150 yards. Infamously didn't get his first passing touchdown until like week 16. I don't know what that is all about. I think there will be more touchdowns for him to come. He finishes the year with 2. I mean, what can't Trey McBride do? He catches everything. He had just 2 drops on 139 targets this year. It's a drop rate of 1.8%. That is elite territory. Comes down to 57% of his contested catches. So the ball skills have really elevated to a point that it's not that they've been bad, but they're entering elite territory as being that trustworthy, kind of big-bodied contested catch winner for Kyler Murray. He's a beast after the catch. He finishes with 14 missed tackles forced. That is third in the NFL among tight ends, so he's really good after the catch. He's fast after the catch. He separates on these crossing routes off of play action. Really was the more dynamic weapon in this Cardinals offense. He's just awesome. So, again, has entered top 5 tight end territory. And another season like this, we're going to be able to, I think, really put him up there into an open conversation at this point in time with who the best tight end in the NFL is. We're going to talk about George Kittle in this episode. We've got Brock Bowers in the league now. I think Trey McBride's still young. Again, another year like this, I think, will absolutely deserve to be in that conversation. And then his running mate, Tip Raymond, the big-bodied third-round rookie tight end, has had a nice, solid season for a rookie tight end, too. He's done his contributions as a run blocker, and I expect him to do that. That was what he did best out of Illinois. Didn't really get too involved in the passing game. I think they could tap into that even more, but he ended up playing a lot for this team. 451 snaps, and to come in as a rookie tight end and be someone that they can trust in the run game, not a ton of tight ends are able to do that. So he keeps climbing up there, just a 68 rating, but he's gone up 3 on the season. And down the road, I really like his potential to emerge as one of the better sort of tight end 2 types. You think of like Josh Oliver in Minnesota is a guy that comes to mind there. I think Tip Raymond can definitely be something like that, which I would say is worth a 3rd-round pick. And then Paris Johnson Jr., he was our super stud in our first episode of Studs and Duds for the Cardinals. He has arrived as a star offensive tackle, and I think he showed this year that he has superstar potential. In year 2, settling in at left tackle, where I think he's more natural, having played right tackle in his rookie season last year. But he finishes the season 22nd in pass blocking efficiency for offensive tackles, which doesn't sound amazing, but again, that includes left and right tackles. So that's going to put him at least in the top half for left tackles. If I just kind of eyeball this, you've got Joe Alt in there, Kelvin Beachum on his own team, actually. You got Andrew Wiley, Mike McGlinchey, Brian O'Neill. You've obviously got Lane Johnson in there, Luke Gedeke. So, yeah, you've got Morgan Moses. So it is pretty much split 50-50 there, being in the top 12 or so of pass blocking efficiency, pressures allowed per snap is what that means. Very, very good for a year 2 player. I loved Paris Johnson, loved how they navigated the draft a year ago to make sure that they got him, who I thought was the clear-cut best tackle in that draft. And he was good in the run game, too. This Cardinals offensive line was a pleasant surprise given the talent that they had to work with. Paris Johnson is the one really talented player that they have, and he made massive strides in the run game as well. It's a bummer their offensive line coach left for Dallas because I think he's done a great job. So Paris is going to have to do this with a new coach, and sometimes that means on his own, depending on how good the O-line coach is. But, just a ton of praise for Paris Johnson. A huge win for the Cardinals this season is to feel great about that high investment that they've got their franchise left tackle for a very long time here. And then Hjalti Froholt, the center, is just continuously proving that he belongs in the NFL. He is just a nasty dickhead of a center. I already mentioned the gains that this team took on the ground this season. Froholt kind of displacing people in the middle. He's got some power, but he's athletic enough to block wide zone, climb up to a linebacker. He's just really nice and smart as well in that regard. Pass blocking's all right for him. Take it or leave it, but, very average at least in terms of pressures allowed and that kind of stuff. So not going to sit here and say he's a superstar, but he's been a huge success of the last 2 years for them to really find a starting center that I think they can be happy with and kind of start to build around now left tackle and center, as I do think they need to continue to add more talent to that offensive line. But obviously good to have a couple of building blocks if you're going to do that. Let's go to the defense now. The defensive line in general just had a very disappointing season, and it was very health-related. The two big signings on the interior of the defensive line, Justin Jones and Bilal Nichols, hardly able to play this season. So a lot of kind of low-end interior defensive linemen trying their best, rotating. And then on the edge, the guy they were most excited about being the first-round pick, Darius Robinson, he hardly plays. He comes out late, and he played poorly, but I don't even want to look into it because I think he was really dealing with an injury. Only played 184 snaps in 6 games for Darius Robinson. And then, of course, for the season, they lose B.J. Ojulari. So hopefully, just a note for next season as we think about the Cardinals and project them next year, they don't have that brutal run of bad health. But needless to say, it's not like they got massive contributions and guys stepping up to talk about from the remaining players. There were some guys, though. Zaven Collins is going to get a +1. Just been a really nice, steady, 3-way edge player, making that conversion from linebacker to edge, of course. You can tell that, he's got the size and the linebacker background to stack, shed, defend the run with high awareness, understands gap discipline and when to ditch and make a play and when he really needs to hold that edge. He's excellent at it. He has really emerged as, it's hard to stack these up on the top of my head, but I think it's safe to throw him in the top 5 to 10 true run-defending edge players in the league. In that regard, the switch has been worth it for the Cardinals. He's also brilliant dropping into coverage with a lot of these different blitz looks from, having these stand-up edges. Jonathan Gannon wanted to make this change for a reason because he loves to drop those edge guys into coverage. And again, you could argue Zaven Collins in the top 3 for coverage dropping edge players. You've got like Andrew Van Ginkel, and then Zaven Collins, if you want to say he's second. Maybe TJ Watt would be in there, but he's uniquely gifted to do that because of the fact that he's played so much linebacker. So he does a couple things at a damn near elite level. It's just as a pass rusher, he's just not an impact rusher. He's okay, and maybe in time he can continue to develop more pass rush moves like we've seen maybe from Andrew Van Ginkel, or you think of like a Kyle Van Noy, playing more true edge late in his career has really developed there. It's not to say it can't come, but we're talking about 31 pressures on 289 snaps, PFF pass rushing grade of 60. It's like you're just not really getting efficient production from him. But a fun player nonetheless that is well deployed by Jonathan Gannon. And then going to give Jesse Luketa a little bit of love here too. He came in late and, started thumping, defending the run. He's such a high effort player out of Penn State. He just doesn't really have the traits, but able to put his aggressiveness and pairing the aggressiveness with proper run discipline to make an impact as a, rotational edge. So +2 from a 64 to a 66 for Luketa. Then back into the second level, Owen Papo started to play a little bit this season. He was this freaky mid-round draft pick out of Auburn that ran a 4.4, but really just had bottom of the barrel tape, really didn't really know what he was doing at linebacker quite yet, so it was going to be a multi-year project. But here into year 2, getting into the rotation and starting to play some coverage snaps, and Owen Papo actually ended up with a pair of really impressive pass breakups and ended up playing, let's see, we're talking about 131 total snaps in 12 games. So really just kind of rotating him in there to get different looks. But he had a pass breakup against the Panthers where he beelines it to the flat, blows up the running back, stops him from making a catch, and then had a nice pass breakup on Aaron Rodgers, actually showing some good zone eyes and understanding Rodgers was going to get to the slant to Devontae Adams, and he beelines it over there and breaks up the pass. So seeing some stuff in coverage from Owen Papo. Good to know that there's a starting point with him. The run defense is still very much unproven, but someone to keep an eye on certainly as we head into year 3, even year 4. Like, can he figure out the position because he is a freaky athlete in terms of straight line speed, and he definitely can hit people. Like, he's a great special teamer as well. So In theory, I can't actually speak on how he's grading out as a special teamer or anything like that, but I would only imagine that he's playing it, because why the hell would you not put him out there on special teams? Cardinals fans will have to fill us in on that, I guess. Give us the special teams report on Owen Popo, because I'm not going to sit here and act like I was grinding kickoff tape on him. But another young athletic player stepping up, Dadrion Taylor Demerson at safety. He basically made it so they didn't have a choice but to play him. He really started to show some good flashes. He rotated a little bit earlier in the season, but weeks 10 against the Jets and week 12 against the Seahawks, he had to step in for Jalen Thompson, who missed a couple weeks there. And then from that point forward, they obviously put Jalen Thompson back into the lineup, but they found ways to get Taylor Demerson on the field in certain packages. And, he ended up with 3 pass breakups on the season, but a lot of plays where he showed off the speed and ability to really lay the lumber and hit with some stopping power. The high-end comp on him coming out was Jalen Thompson. He's a bit of an undersized safety, but he's got the theoretical speed and range and loves to run and hit. I think the Cardinals are encouraged by what they saw from their 4th-round rookie. And, I like to think they're going to continue to get him involved in certain packages. And then Jalen Thompson is a upcoming free agent after next season, so it's something to keep an eye on. Maybe they just want to roll with 3 safeties, but could be someone that if he really steps up could allow the Cardinals to get cheaper and really get a damn near identical player in terms of skill set. Just a matter of obviously continuing to weed out the consistency and learn the position a little bit better. But a +2 for Demerson from 67 to a 69, respectable rookie season for a 4th-round player. And then we did have one more note on a player I didn't mention back with the defensive line, and that's Baron Browning. So Browning's got a high rating, 76, based on, heavy flashes, what he's shown in the league so far. Obviously hasn't really cemented himself as a full starting 3-down edge player. But the Cardinals trade for him from Denver mid-season, a bit of a, interesting move. The Denver was relatively ready to move on from Baron Browning. But towards the end of the season, Browning really turned it on for the Cardinals. I would say reinforced this idea that the 76 rating has weight based on some of the high-end flashes he's shown. He ends up with 17 pressures and 2 sacks over the last 5 weeks of the season. But when they first got him, it was a slow process to get him going. So no ratings changes, just more of a stock check on Baron Browning. He is a pending free agent. I would imagine the Cardinals want him back because they traded for him and he showed some flashes late. But we'll see how that one plays out. And then the kicker, Chad Ryland, year 2 in the league. They pick him up from New England. He had just the most ugly of rookie seasons that you could have imagined. So New England rightfully moves on, but he settles back in and shows off some talent. Had a very good year kicking for the Cardinals. So +7 for the young kicker, Chad Ryland. All right, before we go to the Niners, I do just want to real quick thank Underdog for sponsoring the channel throughout this season. I know that the NFL season is done, but if you are looking for something to get you to watch sports without the NFL, Underdog Pick'ems are a great opportunity to do that. With MLB, with baseball starting up, I play a lot of Underdog Pick'em with baseball. They will still give you that bonus match. You'll still support my channel in the process. It is code TFG if you want to go play at Underdog. But let's move on to the San Francisco 49ers. And there's some ups, there's some downs. It was obviously a disappointing season for San Fran, but we are going to start on a positive note here with their super stud, Dominic Puni, the rookie offensive lineman out of Kansas. Boy, did the Niners need to hit on an O-lineman this year, and boy, did they hit on Dominic Puni out of Kansas. I was too low on Puni. I think I had a 4th to a 5th round grade on him. He played tackle at Kansas. I thought his feet were really slow in pass protection. The Niners obviously had the vision. He's a guard at the next level, and he's going to be a great guard at the next level. He is next in line of these many offensive linemen that clear the 20-yard shuttle threshold. There's a metric out there, it's like basically 2 out of every 3 offensive linemen that run the 20-yard shuttle under 4.45 end up being starters in the league. Dominic Puni was at 4.40. I don't know if that played into the Niners draft process or not, but it's just another notch in the idea that that is a really important test for O-linemen. But God, he is already, I think, in the conversation for a top 10 run blocking guard in the NFL. His tape is phenomenal. He's got obviously the explosiveness off the ball that you're looking for in the run game. He's got great size and technique. He gets his hands inside, runs his feet. He can reach on wide zone. He can create drive off the ball on double teams. Kyle Shanahan, known for his wide zone system, but he does like to pull these guys and mix up the run game. You can do anything with Dominic Puni. There really is a lot of shades of like Wyatt Teller in his prime for the Browns, where he is a legitimate weapon in the run game. And as a pass protector too, like he was better in his rookie year than I thought. Moving from tackle to guard, he obviously had certain aspects of his technique that translated, and maybe not the fastest feet in pass protection moving backwards, but you put him in a phone booth in between the tackles, obviously, and it didn't impact him as much. He wasn't an amazing pass blocker, but very much middle of the pack for starting guards, very passable, especially for a rookie, and I imagine he can absolutely get better there. So great vision by the Niners to go get Dominic Puni at the end of the third round, and as we'll talk about, not just with him, but some of these other rookies, the Niners needed to have a good draft to replenish this roster that is getting more and more expensive and older. Puni was the biggest piece of that, but there's some other guys we're going to talk about here. But let's talk about Brock Purdy. So I actually raised Brock Purdy in our last episode of Studs and Duds. I thought with Ayuk not playing well, and really the start of the season, no Christian McCaffrey out there. Debo wasn't playing great. Like, he just wasn't getting this super team around him earlier in the season. I thought he had some really good games earlier in the year, extending plays, making stuff happen, showing some real upside. Second half of the year, it really went away. And he finishes weeks 9 through 18 with just 3 big-time throws to 10 turnover-worthy plays. I don't think it was all bad. I still like Brock Purdy. He had some good games against the Bears and his last game against Detroit before not playing in Week 18. Like, I still do like Brock Purdy. I still think they probably pay him. But there were just some moments of pause as the season went on of like, okay, is this thing fully legit? Is this a guy we definitely want to give $60 million to because of the Super Bowl run in 2023, the insane production he had in 2023 with a great team around him? Just some pause that he's a guy that can consistently elevate this team. Did think the rating needed to come down again. I still like Brock Purdy. I'm curious where Niners fans are at with this 80 rating now, and do you want to pay him? How do you want to see, like, what do you want to play out with Brock Purdy for the next year if you're a Niners fan? I would really love to get the heartbeat of you Niners fans out there on that one. But another one of these rookies on a positive note, Isaac Guerendo, had to play because all these running backs were getting hurt, and really not a surprise that he worked well in San Francisco. The second they drafted him, it was like, well, of course they drafted him. His pro comp is Raheem Mostert. And I would say he played like a young Raheem Mostert, where you give him a good run, he shows off the speed, he will find the lane and go. I didn't see a ton of creativity from him. He will run through arm tackles. I think there were some moments of questionable vision. I think he still has a lot to prove, but definitely deserves a +3. He ended up finishing with 420 yards on just 84 attempts, and got another 152 through the air, so about 570 yards in a limited time this year. So kind of saw a lot of boxes checked from Isaac Guerendo. But back to being on a negative note, Deebo Samuel -5. I'm very concerned that Deebo's wheels are falling off a little bit. The explosiveness, it just is not there. The dynamism is not there. This was the lowest run after catch per reception of his career. He had half the number of missed tackles forced as he had last year. So 100% less missed tackles forced on just 40% less receptions. So just not the best run after catch receiver in the NFL anymore, which is what he was just maybe a year ago. It's a guy that has had a lot of lingering issues. He's taken a beating. He's played running back at times. it really is a unique conversation for a wide receiver that we don't normally have, in terms of just breaking him down. And he is a guy that's getting hit by linebackers a lot because of the area of the field that they often target him. And again, they give him the football. So the dynamism just not there. He's likely to get traded. I think they've basically already said goodbye. So he's going to be on a different team. And I don't even know if there's too much of a market for him right now, because the idea with Deebo Samuel was always he's the best gadget player in the league. I mean, how many times do we say, yeah, put this guy in the Deebo Samuel role? Well, part of that is like he's not that great of a wide receiver. He drops the ball a lot. He's not this incredible route runner. He's good at it, but it's not like, oh yeah, now that we can't do a bunch of manufactured touches with him, he's still going to be a great wide receiver too. That's not necessarily the case with Deebo. So going to be interesting to see what happens with his market. But in place of that, Jawan Jennings, he reached a level that I just didn't really know was in there for him. And I've always loved Jawan Jennings, called him like the perfect thorn in defense's side when you have to deal with all these other playmakers. I didn't realize he could rise to the point of being the number one target in this offense, which he was. He had 111 targets this year. Nobody else in this offense had over 100. He finishes the year just 25 yards short of a 1,000-yard season. We saw what he did in that Rams game, which was one of the best wide receiver performances of the entire season. He comes down with 63% of his contested catches this year. He's like a legit number 2 wide receiver right now for this Niners team. He's just unbelievably consistent at what he does. You can't ask him to do everything. He's one of the slower starting wide receivers in the league, but he does get open. He's super smart to find openings against zone, and he's pretty good at like snapping off stick routes, out routes, slants, corner routes, digs, like short to intermediate game. He doesn't necessarily need the speed. He'll use that push off. He has very quick feet for a big guy. He's kind of close to what Drake London is doing in Atlanta. I know that's crazy, but honestly, I think a lot of their reps are interchangeable in terms of what they're doing and how well they're doing it. I'm not saying I'd take him over Drake London, but there's a lot of that in Jawan Jennings, and I never really would have said that about him before. So he's really, really settled in nicely, and they extended him for like 3 years, $15 million before this season. He's an absolute bargain for them right now. Oh, and by the way, he's probably the best run blocking receiver in football, on top of all that. So you got that, and then you got George Kittle, who had one of the quietest elite seasons that any player had in the NFL this year. So much talk about Brock Bowers, who was voted first team All-Pro tight end. Look, I can't say a bad word about what Brock Bowers did this year. He's incredible. George Kittle was the better tight end when you factor in the position being blocking. Not that Bowers is bad at it, but George Kittle had comparable numbers. He had 1,106 yards and 8 touchdowns to Brock Bowers' 1,194 yards and 5 touchdowns. But again, the fact that Kittle is the best blocking tight end in the NFL as well, and Bowers, I don't think you probably put in the top 15 for that right now. It does just kind of feel silly to me. Again, not trying to disrespect Bowers here. You can go put him on the second team All-Pro if you want for a rookie tight end. But I do think George Kittle, like, very quietly re-cemented himself as the best tight end in football with Travis Kelce kind of fading away. I mean, how can you not love what he did, man? He's just, when he gets going full speed, he's like, I know this is crazy, but he's like Derrick Henry level scary to tackle. He's just crazy pissed off and fast and has these long strides that it's so hard to get down. He just has another gear that he doesn't get credit for. So, I mean, George Kittle is an elite NFL player and was very quietly reminded us of that this year. And if you're wondering, well, what did he do differently this year compared to recent years? To me, it was more of the ball skills stuff. He's always been productive. He's always been this incredible blocker. But he had the second best drop rate of his career since 2019, and he's had some pretty ugly years in there. 8 drops in 2020, 7 drops just last year. He had 2 drops this season, and the best contested catch win rate of his career as well. He caught 71% of his contested catches. I'd have to check, but that very well might be the best contested catch win rate of any player in the league with over 15 contested catch looks. I can actually confirm that right now. Yes. The only other person north of 70% with more than 10 was Mark Andrews at 75%. But yeah, with 15 plus contested catch target looks, nobody over 70% than George Kittle. So just like constantly using his alpha mentality to go win the football. So that was even another step in his game, another box check. Just can't say enough good things about George Kittle. Turned 30 this season. Then some more talk on the offensive line. Colton McKivitz at right tackle. I don't love him, but you look back on the season and he was very solid for a right tackle. He's not a bad run blocker, and his pass blocking efficiency just keeps getting better and better and better. There are matchups where he just does not have an anchor and he gets overwhelmed and he has some very ugly losses. And if you're a Niners fan, you may or may not be ready to move on from Colton McKivitz, but at least as like a low end kind of weakest link type of option for a right tackle, he's okay. And he's going to go at +2 here. And then Aaron Banks at left guard had his best year. I do think they let him go. He's a very low-end starter, just a 70 to a 71 ratings change here, but deserves some credit. I think was a stickier run blocker this season than he's ever been. So just kind of incremental growth for the former second-round pick. And then Jalen Moore at left tackle. He had to play a decent amount because Trent Williams missed a lot of time, and he's not a superstar, but I think for a swing tackle, he came in and didn't give up a ton of pressures, did his thing, the type any team should be happy to have. And then I do just have like 3 notes on the offense. Christian McCaffrey and Trent Williams are going to get taken out of the 99 club for me. Obviously a lot of injuries, and with Trent Williams, the age. I don't really want to spend too much time on this. I just was reflecting on where their ratings were as, 2 of the 5 highest rated players in the league for me. I don't feel that way about them heading into next year. I still think Trent Williams is awesome, but starting to miss some time. I don't think was quite as dominant as a run blocker. So all the way down to a 96 and still the best tackle in football. Oh no. And then Christian McCaffrey, I think it's pretty unlikely that we see the 99 version of Christian McCaffrey. If we do, I'll happily boost him back up. I mean, he was in the MVP conversations last season, but when he came back, very limited looks at him, but he did look diminished, trying to push through that injury, and then it flares back up again. How can you not have concerns about that? It just seemed a little silly to have him all the way up as a 99 heading into next season, but still, obviously a total beast, and I hope he can recover. And then just real quick on Ricky Pearsall, he's got a 73 rating as a rookie. I just was encouraged by what we saw at the end of the season to bounce back from what was just a really, really slow start for the first-round rookie. Obviously, he got shot and had a very explainable slow start, but feeling good about him settling in as a starter next year. I just wanted to mention that I saw him playing well at the end of the season. It wasn't enough for me to raise him because I did have him as a highly rated rookie coming out. I don't think he really did enough. 31 catches, 400 yards on the season. Not really enough to raise him, but I could see some Niners fans saying, didn't you see Ricky playing great at the end of the year? Why wouldn't you raise him? Just wanted to specify that it's like, I think he showed that my hype on him is justified. It's just he's going to have to come in and do that more consistently, obviously. So let's talk about the defense. Not as much change here. Just one player on the defensive line, Evan Anderson, undrafted pickup, I think did a good job as a rotational thumper, just a 65 to a 66 there. Should be back on the team as a part of the rotation next year. And then at linebacker, D. Winters, a +2, 66 to a 68. I really like D. Winters. He's athletic. He's instinctive. He just needs to settle down and learn the position and the discipline of run defense much better. Still need to see a little bit more in that regard, but He ended up getting on the field because of the whole Devondre Campbell dilemma, and Dre Greenlaw just wasn't really able to go this year, and ends up with 3 pass breakups on the season. Again, the instincts are there. I think he made a very strong case to be the starter next to Fred Warner next season, and I'm excited to see if he gets that opportunity, because I really think he's got the traits to be a starter and something like a Dre Greenlaw. Greenlaw's a pretty special player, but be a really good LB2 next to Fred Warner as early as next season, which will be his 3rd year. But then Renardo Green, another one of these rookies that was just fantastic. He ended up really having to step up as they had injuries, and he became a bigger part of the starting lineup and just really does not look back. He had his ups and downs. He's a rookie corner. That's going to happen to almost everybody, but a very solid league average for a starter, reception percentage allowed of 62%, but he ends up with 9 pass breakups and an interception, just really a lot of ball production, a very good rookie season, and should be locked in as a starter next year. He was really the perfect fit as a bit of a Shavarius Ward replacement. He's a similar style, that lengthy press man corner, looked the part his rookie year. So +4 for Renardo Green. And then just a little bit of a U-turn on the rating on Isaac Yiadom. He came out early in the year and was coming off that breakout season in New Orleans last year, and he ended up with 3 massive games early. We rose his rating. As the year went on, he regressed closer and closer to his older self, started getting picked on much more, kind of phased out here. So -1 for Yiadom. And then I'm going to lower Talanoa Hufanga as well. I still think he's an instinctive player. He's got ball skills, but just not a good coverage player. I think that was exposed more and more when he was out there. And he's just missed so much time with injuries. He's a pending free agent. I don't know that the Niners necessarily want him back. I think Jair Brown settled in solid this season. Obviously, my guy Malik Mustafa looks really good. I wish the best for Hufanga, and maybe the Niners do really value him and they bring him back, but definitely seems like he's having a hard time living up to that heavy hype and high rating that he earned early in his career. So he's back into the 70s now, 80 down to a 78. And then their young kicker, Jake Moody, probably won't be back after they spent a 3rd-round pick on him just 2 years ago. Had one of, if not the worst seasons a kicker had this year. Was really hard to watch, especially considering they drafted him in the 3rd round. Good job, Lynch and Shanahan, on that one. But there are your San Francisco 49ers. Before we go to our number 3 team, I just have a couple revisions, just looking through my roster and listening to some of the notes that you guys had from the community. And I agree with a lot of the stuff you guys were saying on these 3 players here. So Baker Mayfield is going to get another +1 here. We rose him in the NFC South episode, but I don't think we quite rose him enough. A lot of you guys made that comment, and I actually agree. Played really well down the stretch, so we're going to give another +1 for Baker. And then Tua Tagovailoa, I don't think I lowered enough, and a lot of you guys thought that. He really was disappointing this year by the tape. Was essentially just an RPO, quick game screen merchant this year, and wasn't able to push the ball downfield when he did. It just didn't look great, and I just don't feel good about where he's at heading into next year. I don't think many people do. So -2 for Tua, down to a 79. And then Kyle Duggar's going to get a couple of those ratings back. We dropped him from an 83 to an 80, the safety for the Patriots. It was bizarre how poor his coverage stats and film was this season. But many Patriots fans in the comments pointing out that he was playing through an ankle injury that they probably shouldn't have let him play through, and that makes a lot of sense. So I'm willing to accept that and give Kyle Duggar 2 of the 3 ratings that we took away. Still a lot of bad tape out there. I think a -1 is fair, but hoping for a bounce back from Duggar next season. But now for our 3rd team today, the Los Angeles Rams, and for their super stud, Jared Verse, a very easy decision here. Genuinely one of the best rookie defensive seasons you'll ever see. It's got to be up there over the last 10, 15 years in terms of most dominant performances out the gate in year 1. So I tweeted this out, but granted this includes playoffs, so he got a couple extra opportunities in there. He finished 7th in total snaps for all players. But he finished with a 5 pressure lead for the most pressures in the NFL. He finished 4th in the NFL in pass rush win rate. So inside the top 4 from an efficiency basis at beating one-on-one reps for all edge rushers in the entire league. And then on top of that, he was a heavy contributor in the run game. He finished 3rd in the NFL in defensive stops and 7th in PFF run defense grade. I really think he should have been more in the conversation for Defensive Player of the Year than he was. Granted, again, I understand a couple of those big performances came in the playoffs, so I get why he ultimately wasn't. But the point is, for this conversation, he's already an 85 rating for me after 1 year, which is about as high as you'll see me go with a year 1 player. I just can't say enough good things about how dominant he was, how big of a factor he was for their ability to replace somewhat to the degree, honestly, of what they lost in Aaron Donald. That was going to be damn near impossible, and they did damn near the impossible, getting Jared Verse with the 19th pick in the draft. A truly, truly dominant season. I think you can make a case he has one of the 3 best just pure bull rushes in the NFL right now. You're going to take Myles Garrett in that conversation, maybe Micah Parsons, Nick Bosa. So there's obviously those elite guys have elite bull rushes. But maybe let's just say outside of your tier 1 true elite edge rushers, I think you would say Jared Verse has the best true bull rush out of anybody in the league. And then he piggybacks off of that. He really gets tackles to lock in and get ready for that bull rush, because that's what's coming most of the time. But he's got really good swipes and good speed to turn the corner as well. Even if he doesn't have like the most amazing natural bend, he's quick and fast enough to win the corner as well. And a great weapon on stunts too, because he's so explosive. So just a monster season for Jared Verse. What a gift for the Rams to have been able to find him at 19. But let's continue the conversation with the offense, and Puka Nacua getting a +1 here, just continuing to climb and reinforce really who Sean McVay and Matthew Stafford, assuming he's here next year, want to funnel this offense through. Puka in just 13 games finishes with 124 targets, 90 receptions, 1,100 yards, gets into the end zone 3 times. Just such a fun, really dynamic player. In a unique way, right? He's not this incredible route runner. He's not someone that really stacks a ton of corners on the outside. I think he can do that and just be a true pure vertical threat, but that's not really his game. You're going to see him on crossing routes, out routes, jet sweeps, bubble screens, just getting the ball in his hand with momentum, where he is just one of the most physical, nasty players at the catch point and after the catch as well in the entire league. He finishes with 23 missed tackles forced this year. The crazy thing about Puka is I think there is still a lot of room to go up with him. I don't think he is the most polished route runner. He runs hard in his cuts and he gets open and all that, but there's room to do even more with him on that. And I think some of the ball skills stuff, like he makes these unbelievable, spectacular catches, and you can't take those away from him. But he was only 7 for 20 on contested catch wins this year. He cleaned up his drops a little bit, but still had 5 drops this year. So like there's some improvement there with the drops compared to last year, where I want to say he led the NFL in drops last year. But obviously the dude's an absolute machine. But what I'm saying is I'm excited to see what next year looks like for him. It seems like they are going to part ways with Cooper Kupp, very likely, which is going to open up the door for Puka to really break through as, I would just say, even more than what he's been, as just a true alpha, kind of do-it-all, dare I say, like top 5 or 8 wide receiver in the league, because there's just so many great guys right now. But I'm excited to see if there is even more in the tank for him to grow. But then you got Demarcus Robinson. He's just clutch, dude. How many times this season did it feel like the Rams were backed up against the wall, and then all of a sudden Demarcus Robinson is mossing a guy in the end zone or coming open to the corner for a huge moment. Just a steady performer. I think someone that they are pretty comfortable with moving on from Cooper Kupp because of Demarcus Robinson. He finishes with 600 yards, 7 touchdowns, just a really steady wide receiver 3 for them, and deserves some love here, getting a +1 rating. And then Cooper Kupp, another reason they're kind of prepared to move on from him, he just hasn't been as dynamic as his old self. Good player still, good hands. A guy that is Stafford's chemistry guy. He knows exactly where he's going to be on these big moments. Another area where I think that's something that Puka, these critical 3rd and 12s when you're seeing Stafford throw the ball 3 steps before Cooper Kupp begins his break on a corner route. I think Puka can become that guy now in year 3 in this system on this team with Stafford. But Cooper Kupp can still do some of that stuff, still going to win contested catches, still steady hands, but just I think some of the run after catch efficiency, the separation on tape, it just, he does feel like he's slowing down. He's already 32 years old, so that's going to happen, and he was already a guy that had, 4.6, 240 coming in. So I do think it's time we start to, revise how we talk about Cooper Kupp and where he is. He's still a good player. I wish him luck on his next team. I think there's some spots where he could be a really nice, even wide receiver too. But yeah, I think down from an 86 is very much justified on him. And then Hunter Long stepped in. Tyler Higbee missed a ton of time trying to battle through that injury recovery with the ACL last year. But Hunter Long was solid. He took strides as a run blocker. This was a piece that the Rams got along with those mid-round picks for Jalen Ramsey, kind of a throw-in in that trade, but they needed him this year. He made some nice catches at times, settled in as an adequate tight end 2 piece and deserved a little bit of a ratings boost. But then on the offensive line, Alaric Jackson did have a really nice season. I don't quite know how to feel about Alaric Jackson. His underlying metrics are very good. Was just a very stable pass protector and took strides as a run blocker this year. The rating deserves to reflect that here. +4 in the season. He's up to a 75, which is very much a starting caliber tackle with that ratings point. But he is a pending free agent, and I don't even know that his market's going to be that big. I feel like he's still one of these guys that has some ugly losses and has some ugly games. But, he had the suspension earlier in the year for what was a undisclosed player conduct issue. Was a guy that went undrafted, kind of had some questions coming out of school, kind of what happened, where was the development, why was he kind of out of shape for the pre-draft process. There's just some murkiness with Alaric Jackson, and with him hitting the market here with the Rams seemingly maybe letting him go without much of a plan at left tackle. I don't fully know what to think about him, but the tape wasn't bad this year. He had some pretty good games and nice +4 on the whole season for Alaric Jackson. Would be curious what Rams fans think there, if the Rams would be silly to let him go or how you're feeling about him right now. But let's talk about the defense. Although we gave Jared Verse all that praise, Braden Fisk deserves praise as well. This is a guy that I've had at it with Rams fans, certainly. I was certainly low on him coming out, and frankly, I was lower on his tape from the first half of the year. I wasn't quite ready to jump on board with what we saw. I thought it was a lot of schemed up stunt production, which is a good way to tap into his athletic ability, but it just didn't, outside of working some really low-level guards with New England and Seattle, I thought he was quiet a lot and was getting a little overrated at the gate. But anytime I have a take like this, I want to be careful and make sure I'm doing my research. And in the first half of the year, I believed what I was saying about him. But in the second half of the year, I think we saw a much different player. And the reason is he started breaking out a bull rush that he didn't really use at Florida State very often, if at all. If he did, it was in flashes. That was a big concern about him that I had, was that he didn't really use power. In the first half of the year, I didn't see that power either. Second half of the season, I watched all of his pressures from the second half. The power showed up. And that's a just complete difference maker. And the way I put this on Twitter was that even if he is just a stunt merchant, which now that he's shown the bull rush, I'm prepared to open my idea that with that threat of power, he can be more of a one-on-one winner. In the first half of the season, his pass rush win rate was 68th in the NFL. From weeks 9 on, it was 29th. So the metrics back up what I'm saying here too. But even if he is just a stunt scheme merchant, which I've kind of sold him as to this point in time, if he also has power, that's a huge difference maker, because with these stunts, you need a blow-up man, a disruptor, and you need a looper, an athletic, bendy player. And to this point, Braden Fisk had mostly been the looper, where someone else was doing the disruption, and then he would work through another gap, getting around with his quickness and bend for the position. But if he's also able to blow up double teams, occupy offensive linemen, push the pocket, and allow for guys like Byron Murphy and Jared Verse and all these other guys to also threaten that way, it just doubles the things you have to deal with on him. So we'll continue to see, like, if he continues to develop, now that he's really winning with power, can he start to package that over-the-shoulder swim move that he uses so well, those swipes? Can he really put things together and be a dominant pass rusher? We'll see next year. I still think he got quiet at times, even in the second half of the year. But seeing that power now much more consistently than we saw at Florida State and in the first half of his rookie season has completely changed my opinion on Braden Fisk, the player. So going to see a massive rating spike there, +6 up to a 75 rating. And if this is who he is now, that is worth those 2 second-round picks that they spent to go get him. And then another guy on that defensive line, Dejuan Johnson, not a ton to say here, but has done a good job rotating in as a 4-eye, 3-tech type to defend the run. So 65 to a 66. And then Byron Young, productive season. He is a guy that I'm still kind of waiting to see the pass rushing skills come through. I would be a little bit more critical that he ate against some bad offensive lines and was very much a scheme stunt merchant, a cleanup merchant as well, chasing down the quarterback, which it's nice to have a guy like that has 4.4 speed on your D-line that can catch any quarterback to the corner for sure. And that's even a part of this +1 rating, right? It's not that he isn't a useful player as a nice 4th or 5th edge piece on your D-line, but 94th in pass rush win rate, it's pretty dang low. So you might see some of the underlying metrics, the total pressures, the sacks, that kind of stuff, and say, why isn't it even higher than a 74? Why aren't you giving this guy more respect? I think he's a useful piece for the scheme that Shula has put together, but again, 94th in pass rush win rate, with the film not showing him really putting together a nice pass rush plan to consistently beat offensive tackles. More of a stunter and a cleanup man, which is fine. But let's move on to the second level. Linebacker Omar Spates played really well this season. Undrafted pickup out of LSU, flying around, thumping at run defense, something they really needed. I think the Rams felt pretty good about what they saw early on from him, and pretty quickly got him going as a starter after they traded away Ernest Jones, kind of surprisingly, heading into the year. It's not all perfect with him. I think from a coverage perspective, he still has a lot to learn. And even in terms of run defense, it's a tall task trying to diagnose that Eagles run game. But he was a part of the problem in that snow game, just really letting Saquon burst into the second level. Not all his fault either, but he still has a ways to go. But a very impressive young undrafted rookie linebacker, up to a 70 rating from a 63 where he was to start the year. And then into the secondary, I am going to lower Darius Williams. Still had him rated at where he was in Jacksonville, where I thought he played well as an outside corner, but they obviously changed schemes. They didn't want the smaller corner. The Rams picked him up, and he was solid. Not much of a playmaker this year. Had some games down the stretch where teams were really starting to pick on him a little bit too much. That high-scoring game against Buffalo was a tough one for him. Gave up 5 catches for 75 yards. So still a solid player, but at 32 years old, just maybe not quite as rangy in these zone defenses as he once was. So I think that's justified. And then another rookie, Cameron Kinchins, safety out of Miami. He carved his way into the starting lineup for this Rams team, and I don't see him looking back. He finishes with 4 interceptions this year. Pretty solid in run defense, up and down. He had a couple of games in there where the missed tackles got a little out of control, but for the most part, third round pick, pretty good tape at Miami, just kind of available in the third round because safeties don't tend to go too high in the draft, but looks like one of the good ones. I think there's a little bit of like Kirby Joseph to his game, just a kind of rangy, fun, do-it-all safety. It's high praise, obviously, but look for Cam Kinchins to be locked in as a starter next year, and one of the fun young safeties in the league. Looks like a really good draft pick. And then both the specialists are going to go up. Josh Carty had a solid year, +2, 71 to a 73. He was 33 for 38 on field goals this year. The main knock on him is he did miss 4 extra points. So he's not perfect, but solid season for the rookie kicker. And then the punter, Ethan Evans, had a fantastic season. It's funny, just as I sat down to do this show, I saw the Rams Twitter account tweeted out, "Screw it, Ethan Evans highlights." And I'm like, that's funny. I'm actually, ironically, just about to talk about him. But he was 5th in the NFL in punts downed inside the 20-yard line, despite being 16th in the NFL in total attempts. So a very accurate season for the punter. But now let's wrap up with the Seattle Seahawks. With their super stud, it is time for me to eat some crow on Jackson Smith-Njigba, who basically at this point in our last episode of Studs and Duds, I was all but taking victory laps on not hating Jackson Smith-Njigba, but being a little bit lower on him. It's a guy that had a ton of hype coming out of Ohio State, even drew some Justin Jefferson comparisons, and I was like, I mean, he's a good slot receiver. I had him as a first-round grade and in the mix with Zay Flowers, and have to hold my hand up and say Quentin Johnston as well. But for the first 20 games of his career, even 24 games, it was like, yeah, he's just not that great. He's not dynamic after the catch. He's not a vertical threat. He had drop issues. He wasn't really winning tough catches. It just hadn't really clicked for him as what was supposed to be this super high floor rookie. And, I was kind of taking victory laps in the sense of like, yeah, I mean, he's all right. Thought he was a little overhyped. I think he played much closer to that hype this year, in the second half of the year for sure, obviously. And him locking in, plus the way the Seahawks really leaned into his strengths, I think they have officially unlocked the sort of like best case version of Jackson Smith-Njigba. He ends up with 100 receptions for 1,100 yards and 6 touchdowns, and that's including the slow start to the year. But I think a lot of this was him locking in, just cleaned up the drops. Like, that was a crazy thing with him. He had 8 drops in his rookie season. He had some earlier in the year as well, and he wasn't really winning a ton of contested catches. He was 3 for 12 in his rookie season. And just overall, I don't think had really established that kind of high IQ chemistry with Geno Smith earlier in his career. But that was a big thing that really came on. Really, I would say from the last time we did Studs and Duds, it felt like a switch was flipped, almost as if he had watched the episode. He obviously, I don't think, watches my channel, but it was about that moment, and it was like, okay, Geno gets in scramble drill, and Jackson Smith-Njigba is consistently looking at the defense, presenting himself to Geno, and making plays in scramble drill, not to mention just being more reliable in those tough pinches, those contested catch situations to move the chains, make a tough catch with a defender draped on top of him to move the chains on a third down, earning that sort of trust with Geno. So I really think that was big for Jackson Smith-Njigba himself to step up his game. But I think as he became more consistent, Seattle really started to lean into some of the stuff that Smith-Njigba does do so well, to be more than just a short game slot weapon that picks apart zones and makes tough catches and stuff. He did show at times at Ohio State, like, he has a vertical route tree from the slot. He can run slot fades and out and ups and deep corners and deep crosses and make plays in that area from the slot, and they really were able to push the ball down the field much more to him. He goes from an average depth of target of 6.4 in his rookie season, for example, to 9.2 in 2024. And not only can he set up a double move on an out and up and get open deep, but he does have really great ball tracking and body control to make some of those kind of Tyler Lockett-esque catches, where even if he doesn't have great speed to pull away from these defenders consistently deep, if you just give him a nice place back shoulder, he's going to win that ball. And that was, again, something he just wasn't doing early that he is doing now, and it's just all come together for him. So he is definitely behind Amon-Ra St. Brown for the best true slot receiver in the league, I think, at this point. Not sure that that's controversial to say, but yeah, I got egg on my face basically the second I started, kind of poking the bear a little bit, saying, hey, he's fine, but he's not that great. It's pretty great. So Love to see it for JSN and the Seahawks. Let's keep moving through the offense. Zach Charbonnet really came on late. Kenneth Walker just, man, he's so good when he's healthy, but misses time. Charbonnet's got to step in. And really, I think he as well just flipped a switch, just became a way more violent physical runner, which is what you were hoping to see from him. Sometimes when you think that, you think of, using your power in your upper body and trucking guys more. I actually saw the violence in his feet, the fast feet, always ready to make a move. Something switched. I can't even remember what game it was. I think it was a primetime game. Just looking at the profile here, it was probably that Week 14 game at Arizona where he had 134 yards in 22 attempts. Kind of a career night for him. But just looked way more sudden and violent as a runner and carried that out through the rest of the year. And this is going to be, thinking fantasy football, I think with the way Charbonnet finished the year and the fact that Kenneth Walker just has a hard time staying healthy, I think this is very much going to be a frustrating fantasy football split moving forward. But from a football perspective, this is your true thunder and lightning approach and something to be excited about next year. And again, from a football perspective, being able to lean into Charbonnet more can hopefully keep Walker healthy and available for when you really need him later in the season. And then the other back here, Kenny McIntosh, with Walker getting hurt, they needed RB3 to step up, and Kenny McIntosh did. He had some nice runs, nothing crazy, but nice balanced full-size back, put in some good work. 5.5 yards an attempt on 31 attempts, so very solid there, +3 for him. More wide receiver talk here, and in the wrong direction. Really was a bad season for DK Metcalf. I think this season his warts were really brought to the forefront and discussed a lot, but I think a big part of why Jackson Smith and Jigba became such a prominent part of the offense, I think Geno started to trust DK less and less and less. But he is an exhaustingly soft wide receiver for how big he is. Just a 36% contested catch win rate. He gets 41 contested catch targets on the season, which, by the way, was the most in the entire NFL. But he just doesn't use his size well to work back to the ball, to box out defenders. He lets DBs kind of slap at his arms and doesn't really attack the football strong. And man, it's just really frustrating when you want to use this player a certain way and he just doesn't consistently deliver in that way. He had a strong start to the season, but first time in a couple of years, doesn't even get to 1,000 yards on the season. So I think DK's got to come down. He's even getting discussed as a trade target. I don't think it's that crazy. I think he's obviously dynamic and you want to have him, but there's times too, I think, where Seattle draws things up for him. They count on him to do a certain thing and he just doesn't do that. So if they do decide to move on from him, I frankly, I understand the thinking there. I'm not saying I would do it or I would want them to do it if I'm a Seahawks fan. He obviously brings something to the table and draws a lot of attention away from Jackson Smith and Jigba because of his big play threat ability. But just wish, man, he was more physical. And this goes back to last year too, by the way. He was 29%, 9 of 31 on contested catch targets last year too. So this is a 2-year issue. And that's before you even mentioned, there were some times where he screwed Geno over because Geno thinks he's going to sit down on a route or be in a certain place, and DK's just not doing the things that he's supposed to from just kind of an overall football awareness and IQ side of things too. So a lot of frustrations with him coming to the forefront this year. He's lost a couple ratings points on the season. Much less to say on Tyler Lockett. I mean, he's 32 years old. His efficiency is out the window. A -3 in the ratings for him this year. He finishes with just 600 yards. That's the lowest he's had since 2017. So, 32 going on 33 for a guy that is a shorter, more of a speed player than anything. I don't think we're going to get too much of an argument from this. Dropping him down into the 70s here, and he seems like an obvious cut candidate because he's a $30 million cap hit next year with $13 million of dead cap, so presumably you could save about $18 million by releasing him. That seems kind of like a no-brainer. So probably a pending free agent there in Tyler Lockett. And then A.J. Barner going to get some more love. We talked about him in the first episode, but doing his job, stepping in as a nice tight end too, a good compliment to Noah Fant. I thought he was the best. Him and Tip Raymond were the two best run blocking tight ends in the draft, and I would say those two guys were the best two run blocking tight ends as far as rookies go. So he lived up to that, but even later in the year, he started to get some more targets and showed some tenacity after the catch that I didn't know was necessarily in there with him. So he's a nice player. I think they're happy to have him and excited to see where he develops. A lot of Will Dissly to his game, a suitable player to replace Will Dissly as he left this last offseason. But then on the offensive line, Charles Cross has really had a fantastic season. Battled injuries last year after a really good rookie season, but settling in here, he is locked in as a franchise left tackle. The sky's the limit for him, man. He's technically sound. He's, I think, gotten even stronger. I don't see him getting pushed around by the bull rush. Not that it happened all the time in his rookie season, but I wanted to see him continue to develop that anchor. I would say he has. And you're seeing, I would say, more play strength in the run game, too. He had a great season as a run blocker, which wasn't even necessarily something they were expecting from him when they drafted him, because he wasn't great at that at Mississippi State. But an awesome two-way franchise tackle that was taken in the top 10 and is every bit living up to his promise. Unfortunately, not the case with Christian Haynes, someone I really liked coming out. Just unbelievably fun run blocking tape at UConn in a very wide zone heavy run scheme. Wasn't necessarily what Ryan Grubb was doing here. And you take away that scheme fit, Christian Haynes is left as not the biggest guy to move guys off the ball north and south, and certainly not a refined pass protector coming out. So he had a hard time settling in. When he did play, it was pretty ugly. I'm not giving up on Christian Haynes. He's very much going to be on my watch list for next year because they did hire Clint Kubiak. I think they are going to get back to doing a lot more of the Shanahan-style wide zone stuff. A lot of potential for Christian Haynes to settle back in more of a familiar scheme. That stuff really matters for these players, so I'm not giving up on him yet, but a guy that I perceived as one of the steals of the mid-rounds, and certainly wasn't in his rookie season, at least. And then Olu Oluwatimi ended up starting at center after Connor Williams surprised this team by retiring mid-year, and he was all right. He was pretty good in the run game. In pass blocking, I don't think they should look at him as a starter next year. Maybe he could develop into that, but at least he held down his own given the circumstances. He's just not a very tradesy player. He's undersized. I don't think he's a great athlete. So it's hard for him to really assert his dominance week in, week out. But let's talk about the defense. We've got some movement here. Leonard Williams had a phenomenal season. He is just the perfect fit with Mike McDonald's defense that just adores hybridness, flexibility from his defensive linemen. And Leonard Williams is a pure hybrid defensive lineman. You can play him as a 2-tech if you want, and he can hold his own. But you can flex him out as a 5-tech, as a 7-tech. You can use him as a true edge, as he's done in New York at times. You could stand him up as a rush linebacker over the middle, as a stand-up outside linebacker. He will keep you guessing, and we saw that in the Jets game where he drops back into a mid-read coverage or a hook zone coverage on the left side of the field, but peels back, changes direction, and gets a pick six on Aaron Rodgers to the offense's right side of the field. A remarkably athletic play dropping into coverage was a reminder of just how flexible of an athlete he is, literally, like physically speaking, but also in terms of flexibility of the different things you can do with him. I think by getting to step out wide more often, we're seeing what we saw when he played in Patrick Graham's defense back many years ago for the Giants. He's a much better run defender, getting to play more on the outside of the guard on a tackle. And he had one of the better years of his career as a run defender and continued to be a very productive pass rusher as well. They traded a second-round pick for him, and with the defense last year, he just wasn't too much of an impact player. They kind of doubled down and gave him a big contract because they had traded for him. It would have not have been a good look if they let him go. But Mike McDonald knew what he was doing, saying we got to bring him back, and he was definitely their best defensive lineman for the Seahawks this year. So love what we saw from him. He gets a +2 in the ratings. And then another veteran, Jarran Reed. I mean, he has a career best season in pass rush win rate and pressure rate, 48 pressures this season. They weren't really counting on getting too much from Jarran Reed, right? They draft Byron Murphy, who we're going to talk about. They have all these other guys. Reed's kind of a DT3, DT4 type, but they did a really good job bringing him in, finding him matchups, and he made the most of it. He's been very productive since he came back to Seattle here these last 2 seasons. And even at 32 years old, he hits the market. It'll be interesting to see. I don't think there's too many big-name defensive tackles. Granted, it's a great draft class for it, but I don't think there's too many high-end defensive tackles out there in free agency this year. It'll be interesting to see what his market is at his age, coming off arguably the best year of his career, getting after the quarterback at least. But I'm going to lower Byron Murphy. I understand he was battling through injuries, but he did end up getting out there for his fair share of reps. Ends up playing in 14 games, 450 snaps. Not really an impact against the run. 21 pressures, 1 sack on 244 snaps. Just he had his moments, but I thought a lot of Byron Murphy, and he just wasn't really an impact for this team. So just going to drop him 1 as more of a footnote. Hey, slow start, maybe battled some injuries, but not one of the best players in the draft as a rookie, like I projected him, but I still think very highly of him and expect a pretty sizable leap forward next year. He had some very special tape at Texas. I think he was very much in the conversation for who the best defensive players in this draft were, and think he can still get there for sure. But then I have had to apologize for some of my draft takes here, right? Pumping the brakes on Jackson Smith and Jigba a little bit. Being too high on Christian Haynes. I got to at least come around and take a victory lap on Tyrese Knight. I mean, he was like the 27th linebacker I watched. He wasn't even in the PFF draft simulator. Frankly, nobody really knew who he was. But the Seahawks took him in the 4th round. Everyone's like, oh, okay, developmental linebacker. And I'm like, no, Tyrese Knight is freaking awesome. He's one of the best run-defending linebackers in this draft. And he ended up going exactly where my grade was on him. And they filtered through these linebackers, right? They had Dotson. They got rid of him. They had Jerome Baker. They got rid of him. And they turned to the rookie Tyrese Knight, who absolutely looks the part. Not going to sit here and tell you he's perfect and was amazing every week, but flying to the ball, showing up in run defense, had some really nice outings. I think very much affirmed himself as the starter next season. Presuming they also extend Ernest Jones, we'll see what happens there. I would think because he played pretty well for them, but I would be pretty surprised if Tyrese Knight wasn't starting for them after what he showed as a rookie at a position that it's not easy for these guys. But that was something I liked about him out of UTEP, was he actually did linebacker stuff. He looked like he would be ready to play as a rookie, and sure enough, he was. And then into the secondary, just one guy to talk about here, Kobe Bryant. Looked really, really good in his first season as a safety. Ended up carving out a starting role here as they kind of phased out Rayshawn Jenkins more and more. He was brought into the league as a slot corner, and then I believe last year they were starting this transition to safety, but he missed basically his whole season. He only played 140 snaps. So coming in this year, a true safety and really grasping the position. I think the physical aspects of the position especially have been a nice transition for him. He's never been a great, consistent tackler that bogged him down in 2022 even. He had a missed tackle rate of 15% in 2022. He gets that all the way down to 10%. That's pretty good. That's very much above average for a safety. You're inevitably going to miss some tackles because you're going to be meeting elite running backs that are bursting into the second level at full gear. It's hard as shit to get these guys down. These guys' jobs are tough. It's why I've come to value tackling consistency more and more for safeties, because that's the name of the game, right? Safety, or the last line of defense. And a lot of times he did a good job of that because they moved Julian Love all around. They moved Kobe Bryant around, so they asked a lot of them. But much more secure tackler and able to get involved in the run game. And then pretty steady as a coverage player too. You're probably less concerned about that being a converted slot corner. That's going to be a little bit more natural for him. I think having a guy like Julian Love next to him who's made that transition himself is really great. So really a fun 1-2 punch there of Julian Love, Kobe Bryant, two really heady, instinctive playmaking former slot corners for a defense that can be very multiple with these guys. So I would think they feel pretty damn good about where Kobe Bryant's at heading into next year. And at a 73 rating, really just the beginning. You know, we could potentially go even higher than that, but you know, he only started as of week 7, so it's really just kind of the beginning here. But I liked what we saw from Bryant. And then we're gonna end with a punter here, Michael Dickson. Early in his career, was very quickly one of the top punters in the league. Had a couple down years, but I think he had a monster season this year. Really, any metric you want to look at: hang time, accuracy, average, yardage per punt, punts inside the 20. He's basically in the top 5 to 8 for all of it. And you put the whole package together, you got a beast of a punter. So that is Michael Dickson. All right, that's going to do it for NFC West studs and duds. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Let me know if you agree or disagree with any of these ratings changes. If you think I missed anybody, let me know. Please do hit that like button on the way out. If for some reason you're not subscribed, some people watch the videos all the time and realize they're not even subscribed. So if that's you, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of my videos. But other than that, thank you for watching, and I'll see you later. Peace out.